Okay. All right, thank you. All right, so welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to those who are joining us via Zoom and those of us that are watching this via YouTube. We appreciate you tuning in. We are re-recording Pat Gregory's seminar because we had some technical difficulties when he appeared live. But we would like to go ahead and share this wonderful seminar with you. So first of all, you're here for the 2025 Wisconsin Center for Wildlife Spring Seminar Series titled The Art of Waterbird and Wetland Management. This series features a number of talks that are about the interface between, oh, now my slides won't run fast. There we go. So it features a number of talks that are about the interface between art and wildlife management. So we had a couple of folks, including Pat Gregory, who are decoy carvers, who talk about that side of waterfowl art. And our final speaker was Rebecca Knight, who is a wildlife artist and was a contestant in the federal duck stamp competition. And we had a number of folks that talk about the science side of waterfowl and wetland management. And I encourage you to go to our website at uwsp.edu/WCW to see recordings of all of these talks. So very, very interesting stuff. So these are talks that are available to view. I'd like to say thank you to everybody who made this seminar series a possibility. So this is organized by the Wisconsin Center for Wildlife, which is in the College of Natural Resources of UW-Stevens Point. So the College of Natural Resources lets us use their YouTube channel to host the videos, and they help with promotions of the events, and they also provide just some feedback and support for organizing our series. Wisconsin Center for Wildlife is an extension organization, so a UW extension organization, and so they have a hand in what we do, and we'd like to say thank you to them. I'd particularly like to thank our waterfowl professor, Dr. Ben Settinger, and wildlife professor, Dr. Marie Perkins. Both of them helped bring this seminar series together. They helped plan it, they helped contact speakers and help me find speakers to reach out to and helped make this whole thing a reality. So special thank you to those two. And finally, whenever we have a public-facing event, this is an important acknowledgement that we go through for our tribal neighbors. The University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point exists upon land inhabited by the original indigenous people of this area, including the Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and the many other nations and groups that predate colonial borders. We acknowledge that with colonialization, Native American people have been dispossessed of their lands and irreparably changed by the actions of individuals and institutions. We acknowledge our responsibility to understand and respond to those actions. In partnership with the Native American Center, we commit to working together to honor the past, be intentional in the present, and to build our future with truth. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our seminar speaker today. So I'd like to introduce Pat Gregory. Pat Gregory began making hand-carved decoys for hunting in 1984. His great-grandfather, George Bardo, carved hunting decoys on the Illinois River for over 60 years, beginning in the late 1880s. Pat continues this family tradition and hunts the decoys that he carves. Pat has been carving hunting decoys for over 40 years and is considered a master carver. So I'd like to introduce Pat and his talk today, just talking about hunting, or about the art of hunting decoys. Thank you, Pat.
Well, thanks, Marie, for having me. It's an honor to be part of this. Anytime I get to share my heritage, it's just truly a blessing. And to see some of the other names that are part of this series is humbling. And so I know many of them, and they're great outdoors people, and many of them great biologists, several of them great artists. And so it's humbling to be part of this. And thanks for having me. And so I'm going to really work my slide preso just because it kind of guides me through this. And with that, will be, just a lot of background information on me, what I do, why I do it. From what I understand, Jennifer said that you can post questions in the chat box. Is that true, Jennifer?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so as you post that, I'll try and stop and respond to that question as we move along. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll go ahead and get started here. Everybody see my screen okay?
Looks good here.
Okay. All right. So I called this the art form of functional hunting decoys because I do have both art background and I'm a hunter, I'm a conservationist, and so I wanted to kind of share somewhat of the cross section that, hence the title, including the art form of functional hunting decoys. Just a slide to work us through how I'm going to work through this. You know, I don't like talking a lot about me, but I'll do it just because I think it's important you understand, you know, who I am and why am I here? Why am I even doing this? I'm going to talk about history, history both in my family. I'm very fortunate to have waterfowling history in my family, and I'm also going to talk about, you know, some regional waterfowling history. I'm somewhat of a history nerd, and so I love talking about waterfowling and duck hunting history. Why decoys? You know, I'm going to spend obviously quite a bit of time on decoys. I'm going to talk about inspiration. You know, what inspires me as a carver? Why? Um, you know, what do I use? How do I keep going? You know, at 42 years of doing this, I need inspiration. I lean on inspiration, and I count on inspiration. It both keeps me going in what I do, and it also helps prevent burnout. And I'm just going to say, over the years, I've met a lot of carvers that have experienced burnout and no longer do it. And so to stay fresh after 42 years of doing it, I need some inspiration. I'm also going to speak to the art form of decoys, um, and talk about specific things like design. You know, what do I think about? What do I include in design? Well, like when I'm designing my decoys, where's that come from? How do I do that? I'm going to talk about some techniques, just in terms of so people can get a basic understanding of how I craft a decoy. And obviously, I'm going to talk about some hunting, and then we'll close with a few thoughts. So let's get started. So history. So who you're looking at here is my great grandfather George Bardo. He was born in 1880. He lived along the Illinois River, which at the time was a rich ecosystem. And, you know, growing up on a farm, he also hunted. And of course, in 1880, he started carving decoys actually about the mid 90s, 1890s. And then he carved decoys all the way into the 1950s. So he carved for 50 years. And when I did Appraisal Live, I had a lot of younger generations. And I told them, um, back in obviously back in those days, you couldn't pull up your smartphone and order decoys, right? And so you had to find a carver or make your own, or so the selection, the availability of decoys back then was really slim. And so he was a local carver. The Illinois River, the stretch of the Illinois River that he was in was rich with carvers, because it was rich with ducks. And so he learned while he was on the Illinois River. And and then he actually moved north. He was a semi-professional baseball player. He was quite an athlete and a great baseball player. And he was actually traded to a team up in Joliet, Illinois, which is upriver from where he grew up. And that's where he ended up living, spending most of his time. Matter of fact, the picture on the left is his shop up in that area, and the picture on the right is downriver, more toward where he grew up. And so, but he essentially hunted that stretch of the Illinois River. I'll talk more about this when I talk about inspiration, but obviously, he's a huge inspiration to me. To have that waterfowling history in my family is just an amazing blessing, and so he's one of my significant inspirations. The photo on the left, it was his shop, and so you see a sample of his decoys that he carved at his feet there. But then if you look up more toward inside the shop, there's just rows of mallard decoys in there, which was a staple of his decoy production, and it was a staple of his hunting. And so, just for matter of fact information, my great granddad, he carved primarily mallard decoys. He carved both drake and hen mallards. He carved pintails. Those were the predominant puddle ducks they hunted. And then he also carved some diver ducks. He carved canvasbacks and bluebills. And he also carved a handful of geese. He didn't carve many geese because they didn't hunt many geese back then. Actually, back in his day, a goose was a rarity. And so that's a little bit about him and his decoy production. On the right is a picture of him in a duck boat that he built, and he's out pitching decoys on the backwater of the Illinois River, and those are decoys that are around him. And a little tidbit there, he's wearing a Stormy Cromer hat. This picture was about 1920. So think about that, 1920, and he got this picture taken. It's, again, I'm at the risk of being oversimplifying things. It's not like he took out his smartphone and had his buddy take a picture of him. Obviously it was a big deal in the 20s to get a picture like this. You had to be very intentional about that. And so anyways, I just feel very fortunate by my family history. Let's talk about why decoys. Okay. Well, being a conservationist and a hunter, I really I need decoys to hunt with, and I really enjoy making my own, and for several reasons. Okay, I'll talk about those in a little bit, but aside from my personal family history and the legacy in my family, I also like making decoys to hunt with. It means a lot to me that my decoys that I carved with my hands, that I painted with my hands, are in the water and actually can lure ducks within gunshot. That's a big deal to me. I really enjoy that. In waterfowling, some people, let's say they train their own dogs, and their dog is a big motivator for them. Or maybe they make their own duck calls, or maybe they shoot vintage shotguns, whatever. Mine is decoys. Mine is having my own rig of decoys out there that I can, lure ducks in to my decoys. The picture on the left there is scaup banding on the Mississippi River. I've done that for many years over on Pool 19, and that's a huge reason why I like making my own decoys, because I love ducks. I mean, I do consider myself a duck nerd, and I'm proud of it. So the other thing is at 42 years, I'm starting to have people that approach me about wanting to carve decoys and getting help to carve decoys. I had a fellow in my shop today that I'm helping get started, and I'm a teacher at heart, and that's a big driver for me, is to help people find that creative gene deep down inside of them, and actually learn to carve decoys. And so yeah, decoys is a mainstay in our home, and I sure enjoy them. So inspiration, I can look at these two photos. So I'll give you just a quick background on these photos. So I've had the privilege of hunting the Delta Marsh twice. I have done a lot of extensive research on the history of the Delta Research Station. And, that's just filled me full of, huge inspiration. Well, when we were there in 2014, I got to meet the then photographer for Delta Waterfowl, Fred Greenslade. Well, Fred found out I was a decoy carver. He started buying some of my decoys, and Fred started to assemble rig decoys, hand carved by me, that he would hunt with. And Fred, being a photographer, he would also go out in the spring in the Delta Marsh and set the decoys out, get in the cattails with his camera and get photos like this. Now, as a duck nerd, as a decoy carver, this was back when I was working. I'd be on my computer. I'm sitting there, boom, I get an email from Fred, and he's sending me pictures like this. I'm just going to say, thanks, Fred. I'm working, and how am I going to get back to work after seeing something like this? But Fred graciously took a lot of pictures of my decoys in the spring and at the Delta Marsh. I've got a host of these are redheads. Those are the drake there is my redhead drake, and the photo on the left, that's a scaup hen. That's mine as well. And Fred would just snap pictures of these spring birds in spring plumage landing in my decoys. And wow, for any carver, that would be just quite a rush. The picture on the right is interesting because these are spring photos. And so if you notice that live drake, he's getting between the hen and my decoy. So in these photos, not only did I get spring plumage, which is just amazing, their best plumage, but I also get a lot of posturing, a lot of that spring posturing between the drakes and the hens. And that drake on the right, he's kind of like posturing. He's getting between his hen and my decoy and telling them basically to get lost. So obviously things like this inspire me. I get pictures like this, and I literally go out in the shop and draw up a pattern and start carving. What an amazing inspiration! The ducks themselves are a significant inspiration for me. Here's some more photos from Fred. The hen decoy in both pictures is one that I carved, and you can see that drake. He seems pretty excited about coming into her in terms of landing. And then the photo on the right, you can even see this hen. She's posturing. She's getting more toward her drake than letting my hen decoy get close to her. So again, the ducks themselves are a great inspiration for me. And I just have to say to Fred, how can you not be inspired as a carver when you see photos like this of your decoys and live ducks? That's amazing. Another inspiration is history. Like I said, having been up to the Delta Marsh in both 2014 and 2018, when I go hunting in a historic area, I like to do some research in that area to better understand, the people, the culture, why they're, because generally when people hunted ducks in a specific area, it was because they were on a migratory path, right? And the Delta Marsh is a major nesting area for both canvasbacks and redheads. And the Delta Research Station there at Delta is historic. It's one of the first research stations of its kind. A lot of the good duck science that we experience today came through and from biologists that were at Delta. And so, to be able to go and hunt an area like that just inspires me. Both of the canvasback decoys that you see in these photos are copied from the Delta Marsh style canvasback. They have a specific style up at the Delta Marsh. And so I captured those patterns from an actual Delta Marsh decoy and kind of built my own. And so traveling to historic areas like that just totally inspires me as a carver. The puppy on the left, dogs inspire me. I'm just going to say, dogs are a huge inspiration to me. I get to hunt with a lot of what I think are outstanding retrievers. I don't have a retriever anymore, but I have friends that have outstanding retrievers, and they take me out and treat me to hunts. And I kind of look at it like, hey, I want our dogs to swim through fine decoys. I don't want them swimming through plastic decoys. I want them to swim through nice hand carved decoys. I just think enough of our dogs that I want them to. So the photo on the left of the retriever just reminds me that the retrievers that I hunt with are just a huge inspiration to me, and as our hunting historic areas like the Delta Marsh. Some more pictures from the Delta Marsh. So the photo on the left is an actual Delta Marsh canvasback decoy built in the 1950s, and before we went up to the marsh in 2014, I found a gentleman that had this decoy. He had several of them actually, and I bought this decoy from him. And I thought, how cool would it be to take that old girl, it's a canvasback hen, to take that old girl back to her home and hunt her. And so I did. Obviously, a lot of my collecting friends probably think I'm nuts, and that's okay. But I'll just tell you this, she got into water, no problem. She worked great. And you can see from the photo on the right, she lured canvasbacks in. And so what a thrill it is to go back and hunt like our forefathers did, and to be able to hunt historic areas that are still productive for waterfowl, and also a major significant research waterfowl research area for ducks. And so that's a huge inspiration for me, is not only the history but the waterfowl conservation as well. Let's talk about decoys as an art form. That's kind of the impetus of this whole thing. I do have some art background. I spent some time in college in commercial art. I left it and took another path, but I will say this. I tell people, all people come to me that want to learn to carve, and you don't really need to be an artist to carve decoys. Now, does it help? Absolutely. But is it essential? No. If that was essential, a lot of the old time carvers, the decoy carvers that made decoys over the years, would have never carved decoys. So while it's not a requirement to become a decoy carver, it does help. So decoys is an art form. If you look at the pair of blue-winged teal on the left, obviously there's a lot of, I'll just say, goodness going on in those decoys. Give you an example. I talked to the group there at Stevens Point. I told them about, there's some things that are pleasing to our eye. So, and one of the things I talked about are nice, easy curves. So if you look at the drake, the blue-winged teal drake on the top, you look at the curves in that decoy, they're nice and gentle and easy, and they flow nice. Well, all of those things are really pleasing to our eye. I mean, the colors of these decoys, like these blue-winged teal drakes, are in spring plumage. They're just gorgeous this time of year. And so the colors are pleasing, the flow of the lines are pleasing, even the pose that decoy is in. I call it a skimmer or a swimmer pose. That's just really pleasing to our eye. It suggests movement and so on. And so I look for that in my decoys. And I'm just going to say that's another reason why I carve my own decoys, because, probably up until, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, you couldn't buy decoys that were in poses like this. These days, a lot of the new the companies that are building plastic decoys, they're getting some actual outstanding decoy carvers to model from, and so they're building some better poses. But I like to create my own poses with the decoys, and that takes a little bit of thought when it comes to Artform. The pair of green wings on the right, I wanted a real kind of puffy snuggler decoy. And so I developed my own snuggler pattern. And so, those are the kind of things you can do as you go out and you study waterfowl, and maybe your mind captures some poses. You can build those when it comes time to carve in your own decoys, build patterns for them, and then actually execute on those patterns. But it does take a little bit of thought when it comes to Artform and carving decoys. Let's talk a little bit about design. So when I first started carving decoys in 1984, I actually used my great granddad's patterns. I was able to obtain all of his old patterns. Some of them go back to the 1800s. And so I started copying my great granddad's patterns, right? But then I started getting into things like, for example, I wanted to carve a ruddy duck. Well, my great granddad never carved a ruddy duck. So I was confronted with, okay, if you're going to do that, you need to make your own patterns. These days, I use the live ducks, I used harvested ducks, I'll say, to make my own patterns. That's also not only a design thing with me, but it's also an inspiration thing for me. Matter of fact, like if I'm hunting and maybe I harvest a drake or hen that just is especially a prime example, and it inspires me. I literally go back to my shop when I get home. I use old cereal boxes for my cardboard for the patterns, and I just take that bird and I make a pattern from it, and I make different poses. And so I get a lot of people that contact me through social media and say, "Hey, do you have patterns for this or that?" And I try to encourage people to, if they're a hunter, is to make your own patterns. I mean, what better subject matter can you use than actually using the actual bird itself? And so, from a design point of view, I really try to use the actual birds themselves, for designing my own patterns. Let's talk about techniques. So, woodworking techniques are pretty simple, honestly. If I was going to help somebody get started on carving decoys, I can teach you woodworking techniques. Painting is probably the bigger phobia. Painting takes a little bit of skill. Painting is a little bit tougher to teach, but actual woodworking technique is pretty simple and straightforward. So as far as like toolage for carving, I use knives. You can see in the photo, the image on the left, I use knives. And the image on the right is actually a spoke shave. That's part of the knife family. And so, all of these knives work well at taking wood off. Some people say, carving a decoy is just taking off what doesn't look like a duck. Well, it's true, but I wish it were that easy. So this is actually the image on the left. That's my great granddad's draw knife. It's actually that draw knife has carved thousands of decoys, thousands, and it still works well. You keep an edge on it, and so I use his draw knife on every decoy I make. The image on the right is and a draw knife obviously is still in the knife family. The image on the right is I also use a family of tools of like files and rasps. So this is a 16-inch Nicholson wood rasp in the image on the right. That's a very coarse rasp. You could actually shoe a horse with that rasp. It's very similar to what they call a farrier rasp that they use to shoe a horse, but it's very good at taking wood off. And just a little tidbit about all my tools. When you're carving a decoy, you're essentially taking something that's square and making it round. Okay, let me say that again. You're taking something that's square and making it round. So the whole thrust of carving the head and carving the body is rounding it. And so, in order to do that effectively, I need tools that around. Okay, like this rasp you're looking at, it's a half round. The top of it is actually round. That works particularly well in like shoulder areas and stuff like that. Even that draw knife in the left image is got somewhat of a rounded blade. So if you're going to carve into round, you need to use round tools. And so I use uh, power tools like a bandsaw to cut it out. Then I use the knife family to do some carving on the head and the body. And then when it gets time to start doing some rounding, I get in there with some rasps and files. Okay, let's go on to the next one. I also use some specialized tools. So these particular tools are what they call feather stamps. And so this is a Michigan. These tools originate in Michigan, and I love the ingenuity of some of the old time carvers. They figured out, like for example, they wanted a quick means to put feathers on the body of a decoy. Okay, so what they did is they built these feather stamps. They're made out of 1/4-inch flat steel. They grind down um, the ends of them to make feather shapes, and you just basically hit them with a hammer. And like for example, I can stamp an entire say a hen body in um, less than 10 minutes. It's just really a quick and efficient way. And you might say, well, do you really need to put feathers on a decoy? Probably not, but um, you have to be pleased with the final product as a carver too. So I do use some specialized tools, and these are considered what they call feather stamps, and I use those. So let's go to hunting. You know, this is why I do what I do. When I first started in 1984, I really was inspired by my great granddad making hunting decoys, and back in their day, it was to put food on the table. That was period. Why they made them. They didn't make them for show. They didn't make them to put them on a shelf. They made hunting decoys. They're essentially tools, to lure ducks within gunshot. Well, being a duck hunter, I wanted to do the same thing, and so I set out to make my own hunting rig, which is a group of your decoys. And in about 1986, I made my first hunting rig, and I went hunting, and I've been hooked ever since. It's like I said, it's just an amazing uh, thing for me to see ducks light into my decoys. The image on the left are blue-winged teal. Those are what we consider here on the Illinois River a sleeper pattern. It's a classic Illinois River pose. I don't think although my great granddad, he did make a few blue-winged teal. I don't know that he ever made a sleeper, and so I kind of like sleepers, and um, they float well, and they work well. The image on the right um, um, is some diver hunting. This was on Green Bay, Wisconsin, and so I not only make puddle duck decoys that I hunt marshes with down here in Illinois, but I also make diver decoys, and we hunt big water and chase divers. And So the redheads on the right are an example of using my decoys on a larger body of water. I will say, generally, there's some different considerations on the design of the decoy. Puddle duck decoys can be a little bit smaller. They can have more of a rounded bottom because they're in shallow water and generally not a ton of wind if you're in some protected water. Whereas the divers, they need the big water decoys, they need a flat bottom and, something that's going to ride rougher water a little bit better. And the point of that is there are design considerations based on specific hunting circumstances and even based on, the different species of ducks. And so all that requires some thought that you're going to put into design when you're designing your decoys. Some additional hunting pictures. You're seeing a lot of teal here. I like chasing teal. I'm part of a duck club down here on the Illinois River. We own 475 acres of moist soil plants. It's good natural habitat. And because it's shallow water and they're moist soil plants, we have a lot of teal. And consequently, I hunt a lot of teal, and so do my friends that hunt with me. And so they get to shoot over my hand carved decoys. And so I do make a lot of teal just based on where I hunt. And I just, as a duck person, I just really enjoy teal. I enjoy how beautiful they are. And I'm just going to say, as far as table fare, they're an excellent eating duck as well. And so I'm also big. I'm just going to say this. I'm also big on ducks as food. I take pride in a lot of the recipes and how I cook them and prepare them, and just really enjoy ducks as table fare. So hunting is also a big inspiration for me. It's kind of think of this, the full life cycle. Okay, I go out hunting, I harvest a nice duck, I take it back, I put it on the cardboard, I make a pattern, I carve, some decoys out of it, and then I go out and I hunt with them. I harvest ducks. I bring it back, and I clean them. I prepare them and I cook them and I enjoy them as table fare. That's like the full cycle of life for me, being a duck hunter, and so that part's very enjoyable. So let me close here. This was just the mountaintops of what I do. Obviously, there's a lot of detail inside of carving decoys and being a waterfowler. But I would just say that I just enjoy the total package of it. I enjoy the conservation side of it. I enjoy the art side of it, the carving decoys and being inspired and building patterns and creating these objects and taking them out and figuring out which ones to make and how to properly build them, to throw them in water and to use them as a functional group, and there's just a lot of thought that goes into this. And the best part, honestly, is I get to do it with friends and family. This is the real blessing of the whole thing. I mean, I just have the privilege of going hunting with some great friends and family members, and we get to enjoy all this. Everybody kind of makes a contribution to the group. Mine happens to be decoys, and that's I guess that's my plight is making decoys and being able to hunt and bring them to the hunt, have people enjoy them, and just create those memories that we really like to enjoy. So honestly, I'm just going to close here and say thank you for your time. Hopefully, you've learned a little bit about the art form of me making my hunting decoys and why I enjoy it so much. So thank you very much.
Great, Pat. Thank you so much for that. It looks like I do have a question,
Okay.
and so we have a question that asks, "What was the first decoy you ever carved, and do you still have it and hunt with it?"
So great question. So yes and no. And so here's the specifics of that. So yes, I have the first decoy I ever carved. Actually, I started carving miniatures. My great granddad made little miniatures. They were probably 6 inches long. That was kind of a decorative thing that he did for friends and family. And so when I was 10 years old, a great aunt of mine gave me my first little mallard decoy from my great granddad, and it's awesome because you never know what's going to inspire a child. I was 10 years old when I got that. So the first decoy I made was a little 6-inch mallard decoy. Obviously, I don't hunt with it; it's a miniature, but yes, I still have it. But the early decoys that I did make for hunting, I do still have some of them. And I take them out for a little test run every now and then. They're 1986. I got a pair of canvasbacks from 1986, and they work great. So part of my history. Good question.
Thank you. And I actually have a question in terms
Oh,
of,
sure.
you were talking about, these different poses that you like, part of because, it's pleasing to the eye, but I'm curious, like you had the teal that is kind of in the sleeper pose, or you showed others
Mhm.
that have the head more upright or kind of a fluffier kind of look. Do you find that in terms of hunting over them, is there a difference in terms of how different poses, do they bring in ducks more frequently, or do the ducks
Sure.
seem to have a preference?
Well, I'd like to think so, Jennifer. Here's what I would say to that. One of the things I encourage people to do is study ducks. Like even this time of year, we're in the spring migration. It's great to get outside, get out there with some binoculars, get out there with a camera. But if you ever closely study a group of ducks, their heads are not all the same way. They're doing ducks are like we are. They're social. They're doing different things. They're chasing each other. They're especially this time of year. But so the point is when I see a group of ducks, their heads are doing different things, and so to better assimilate, a group of decoys, I do the same thing. A group of ducks. I'm sorry. I do the same thing with my decoys. I want the heads doing turned different directions, doing different things to really better assimilate not only a group of ducks but even movement. Like that that swimmer pose that I make. That kind of shows a little movement. I'll give you a quick story. So I work with Delta Waterfowl on a duck hunt every year, and we pick a species, and we're trying to socialize lesser species. Everybody knows mallards, but we pick a sub kind of a lesser species, I'll say, other than mallards, and we pick a species every year. We get carvers to donate decoys, and then we do a hunt, and then we auction the decoys at auctions, at banquets, and the money goes to Delta. But here's the point: this year we did green wing teal, and I did one of I haven't seen anybody else do this swimmer pose that I do, and so I did a swimmer green wing hen, and um, but first of all, the dog was going nuts. Like the retriever that was there, he was all anxious. He kept looking at my decoy, and it bothered him, because it kind of looked alive, But I think the ducks overall notice peace and tranquility. They notice something that's more natural. Another quick story, and this is so we were in Green Bay one year, and I was going diver hunting with a friend of mine, and he had 6 lines of a dozen decoys, and he had all plastic decoys. And so I said to him, I said, "Hey Matt, could I bring a line of my hand cards to throw in with your plastics?" He said, "Sure." So he took a bag of his decoys out and he put a bag of mine in. And so we deployed all the 6 lines of decoys, right? And so he put the hand cars over in front of him. Where do you think the ducks went?
They
To
went
the
to
hand
yours.
cars.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that to kind of toot my horn, but what I'm saying is here's my theory on that. These ducks come all the way down the flyway starting in Canada, okay? There's about 6 producers of plastic decoys. And so essentially these ducks are seeing the same decoys coming all the way down the flyway, starting, all the way up in Alberta, all the way down the flyway. And they're getting shot at. And my thinking is when they see something different, something, they respond to it. It's something different, right? It's not the same old that they're seeing all the way down the flyway. I haven't done any research to prove that, but I'm just saying from an observation standpoint, I had pretty good luck with ducks responding to my decoys, and I think different, especially in the day and age we're in, that different look goes a long way. Just a little pet theology.
That's interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing that, because it's just
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
I've always been curious about.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
but that is all the questions that I had and all that the audience had. So I'm going to go ahead and say thank you, and I'm going to stop recording in
Okay.
a second if you wanted to stick around for another minute. But
Okay.
thank you very much, and I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Al.